Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a Books Beside My Bed video where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. When I tell you that when I looked at the list of things that I read this week and I realised the first book that I'm going to talk about is included in this list, I honestly feel like I read this book last year because this week has just been very, very long. So we're going to jump straight into it. I am going to talk about 7 books. There were a couple of other books that were included in this reading week, but they featured in my Lunar New Year vlog. So I will leave that linked on the screen if you want to find out about the books that I read that were included in this week, but in that vlog, because I'm not going to rehash them. I talked about them quite a bit in the vlog. So last weekend, Izzy and May were hosting the 24-hour-ish readathon, which I participated in, and I was able to do one of the live shows and then life happened. But it was essentially just an opportunity to try and read as many things as you could in 24-ish hours. And the first book that I picked up was Orbital by Samantha Harvey. This was actually a book that I purchased the night before the readathon started because I did a trip into the city and I bought a bunch of books that I had no idea about any of them, and I'm kind of glad that I did. This one I picked up totally because of the cover. It's absolutely gorgeous. It is a literary fiction sci-fi story. And it is about 6 astronauts who are up in like the International Space Station or equivalent in this book. They've been up there for months. They are constantly working on their projects, but also looking down at the Earth. And it is their thoughts and feelings, both being astronauts on a space station and also observing the Earth below them and the sort of the magnitude of that. All of them are going through various things. One of the astronauts finds out that her mother has passed away while she has been in space, and so is dealing with that grief. There are interpersonal relationships that all of them are reflecting on, both with each other but also down on Earth. Like, it's very much a reflection book, but my goodness, the language in here is just stunning. Samantha Harvey has just like, this is tiny and it's not at all a fast-paced moving book, and it's probably one that I will need to come back to at some point and read much more slowly. I would love to annotate this, like the whole thing would be just highlighted because there were so many turns of phrase that I just love. This was just not at all what I have read recently and I thoroughly enjoyed it. For the same readathon, I also picked up and read most of the stories in the Rare 2023 Melbourne Anthology. So this was a special edition anthology just for the Melbourne Rare event. It featured 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 different authors. I think I said in my vlog that I went around and I did get each author to sign their section. So there's 11 signatures in here. And this was really an interesting collection of stories. There were some in here that I absolutely loved. So Rebecca Zanetti, I've actually read, I think maybe a short story or something from before. Her books were entertaining and fun. They're like romantic suspense / sci-fi-ish. And so sitting in my wheelhouse. There was a surprising amount of daddy and little play in these stories. So there were a whole stack that I started reading and I had to skip because that's not my thing. No shame on anyone who likes that, but not my thing. 2 others that I really liked. There was one by Elizabeth Saffler about a woman who is set up for a crime in her business. She's like an accountant and she's set up as if she's embezzled or stolen money from the company that she's working for. And she hasn't. Someone else has done it and framed her for it. And it's about her getting a second chance and meeting a group of people who have also, you know, been framed for things and had to survive and move on. And she gets a new job and also finds a partner out of it. And it's fairly tumultuous up and down that relationship, but it was a very interesting and compelling story. So I would be interested in trying more of her work in the future. And then Nissa Catherine, who I think I have read one other thing by Nissa Catherine, who is an Australian author. And I really enjoyed the story in here. It was a romantic suspense story about neighbours. The female main character in the story is being stalked and terrorised in her home. And the male main character who lives next door is former military and is kind of amused by her because she helps with rescue animals and she accidentally loses a kangaroo joey on his property and he helps her find it. And then when she is in trouble, he helps her out. So I enjoyed that one. I need to go back and read more Nissa Catherine because like I said, I've read it before, I've enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the story in here. This was probably more miss than hit, but the stories in here that I liked, I really liked. And that was all I got through on that weekend because, as I said, life. So as I said, I was reading a lot of other things for other various projects throughout the week. So the next book I actually read on Valentine's Day. I had to pick something short because I'd been in the city for an event with Jodie McAllister. She was launching her book, Not Here to Make Friends. By the time I got back, I didn't have very long. I had to go to sleep eventually. So I read Cupid's Peak, or reread Cupid's Peak by Jacquot because why not?
It's set during Valentine's Day. It has a hockey player. It has forced proximity. It is very, very steamy, and I had a great time. My outfit matches today. I also decided to pick up Interlude, the First Noel by Bauer. This is the novella set between book 1 and 2 in the Executive Office series. So Ethan was the head of Jack's Secret Service detail. Jack is the President of the United States. And because of their relationship and it coming out to the public, Ethan has been exiled out of DC. And so he and Jack really only get to spend time together on the weekends. So Ethan is constantly flying back to DC and spending the weekends with him when possible, and then flying back to work. Obviously, he's kind of a pariah within the organization, and he's trying to deal with that because he knows that Jack is worth it. Both of them are not really coping with the separation really well, and it's their first Christmas. And so they're trying to make things work. And there are still people who have Ethan's back in the story and all of that. There's also the start of some of the political maneuvers that are happening from the end of book 1 that will lead into book 2 that Jack is making, and the alliances and things like that. So you can't read this without reading the first book, but I just, enjoy Bauer's writing. So this was just a delight to read during the week. Bonus for me, it was also short because my brain capacity was not at optimal functioning level. I also read a novella called The Exception to the Rule by Christina. This is part of an interconnected novella romance series by various authors. I know Sally Thorne has one in here, and a couple of other people who I've mentally blanked on who they are. I actually didn't start this series because of Christina or Sally Thorne. There was someone else who had a book in the collection, and it's just totally slipped my mind. But anyway, it's a collection of novellas. They all released roughly about the same time, interconnected world. And this is the story of Tara and Callum. They meet when Callum accidentally emails Tara 1 year when they are teenagers. I think one is 16 and the other's 18 or 17, something like that. Anyway, it's just a wrong email sent to the wrong email address, and they start exchanging emails every Valentine's Day. They don't know who the other person is. They've never met, but every Valentine's Day, they send each other a message, and that's kind of the only communication they have for many, many years. And they develop feelings for one another. They're, friends and confidants because they begin to contact each other more and more often, to the point where, in their early to mid 20s, they decide, it would be kind of cool to meet, but one of them is always constantly in a relationship. And so they decide just to keep it as, email communication until one of them figures out who the other person is. There's a bit of a conflict of interest. I won't say what it is because it kind of spoils what's going on. So most of the time they don't know who the other person is. They just have this great banter back and forth. And the way that one of the characters finds out who the other person is a total accident. It was fun, it was short, it was just kind of light and fluffy, and I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to continuing the other novellas in the series. I'm just going to kind of pick one up every now and then when I can, because they're all about 100 pages long. I also listened to An American Sunrise by Joy Harjo. So I read a picture book by Joy for my BookTubers favourite books of 2023, and a lot of people had said they would be interested in me picking up more of her work. And so this one I was able to borrow on Audible because I have an Audible subscription. And I will try and continue to pick up more of Joy's works because I really enjoyed this one, especially since she was the one reading out her work, which was amazing. It was mostly poetry, but there was also song and I think some short little essay excerpt type things. And it was just delightful. Her language and her turn of phrase is just amazing. And it was nice to read something else by a Native American author, and I really enjoyed the experience. The audio is very short. I think it's less than 2 hours long. And I will be trying to find some more books, but it's kind of hard over here because she's not an author that's as common. Everything's quite pricey. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to access her books because I haven't been able to find as many as I would have thought through my library, but I'm working on it. And then last but not least, last night I read Scoreless Game by Witt and Zabo. And if you're going to start a 630 page book at 7 o'clock at night, yeah, that means I'm very tired this morning. But I absolutely love this book. This is the second book in the On the Board series. There is a third book coming. I don't know when, there's no date, but it was also the oldest book on my KU TBR. So I borrowed this out in June last year. I'm glad that I read it because I really enjoyed it. I loved Rookie Mistake when I read it last year. And this is the second book in the series, and it follows the team captain and his best friend from that first book. So they play for Pittsburgh. They're a professional NHL team. One is Swedish, the other is Russian. and they have been friends for 11 years. And at the start of this book, stuff is not right. Like it's not good. And this book comes with very heavy content warnings. Hi guys, I am editing this video and I still have like minutes left to go talking about this book, but I don't think I go through all of the content warnings. So I just thought I would read out my list so that I am covering it off, because these books do contain a lot. So there is alcoholism and binge drinking on page. There are mentions of suicidal ideation. There is incredibly toxic family, which I'll talk about later, acephobia. And I think those are the main ones. No, I forgot. There is also catfishing, but they do pop up in the book, and all of them are handled very, very well, but just, be kind to yourself if you're reading it. So one of the characters is dealing with a lot of trauma from a very toxic relationship with his parents. His parents are god-awful, and they're in this book and they're not great. And as a result, he's developed a binge drinking problem. At the start of this book, he is quite literally spiraling to the point where he ends up in hospital with alcohol poisoning. And his best friend, the team captain, is someone who takes responsibility for other people. He's the mother hen. He wants to make sure that everyone's okay. And he thinks that he's just watching his friend spiral. This is before that hospitalization even happens. He's watching his friend spiraling and he doesn't know what to do. Elias feels like Nikolai hates him and he doesn't know how to process that. These two fools are both in love with each other and both think that the other person doesn't have those feelings for them. Nikolai is pansexual and is known for just having a series of one-night stands. He doesn't take things too seriously because he doesn't believe he's worth that. And that's something that he's, been told his entire life by his parents, that he's not worth it, that he's not good enough for anyone. Why isn't he captain? Why hasn't he done this? Why doesn't he have a relationship? But by the way, you're not good enough for any of these things. So it's no wonder that he has an addiction. And then you have Elias, who is asexual and panromantic, which is not a combination I have read very much of at all and was really interesting to read. And sort of the exploration of his asexuality, which he's totally comfortable with, but he doesn't really share it with other people because he's been burned quite badly by a partner in the past. And he's never really told his friends that he is ace. And so he spends some of the book sort of exploring that with his friends and trying to help them understand where he is coming from. This all comes to a head when he decides that he's going to try a dating app, and Nikolai begins to see that he's losing his friend. And he does some incredibly questionable things, but I kind of get it and why it happened in the context of this story, because it totally blows up in Nikolai's face. Like it 100% blows up in his face. And my friends, that is like the first 30% of the book. And this is a 630 page book. The rest of this is Nikolai, one being in rehab, the other detoxing. Nikolai is ultimately suspended from the team while he is in rehab. And it is about him and Elias rebuilding trust in their relationship, admitting their feelings and working through that and what that looks like for them. It's about forgiveness. And then the biggest trigger in Nikolai's life turns up, and that's his parents. So they turn up from Russia and they are just, oh my gosh. I wanted to scream every time they were on page because they're so mean, so mean. But my favorite thing in the book is that Elias speaks Russian and he speaks it fluently. And that's how he and Nikolai became friends initially when they were first drafted to the team. He just started talking to Nikolai in Russian because Nikolai didn't have great English at the time. And that's how Nikolai ended up learning English, because he became good friends with Elias. So he speaks fluent Russian. And when Nikolai's parents are out, they put on a appropriate face when speaking in English and then turn around and are totally saying the rudest things about both Nikolai and Elias in Russian, and they don't realize he understands. And this comes to a head at the end of the book, and my gosh, that was a great scene. One of the things that I absolutely loved about this book is the found family of the Pittsburgh NHL team. Like, they just rally around Nikolai. And when Nikolai and Elias finally get together, the scene with the team is absolutely 100% one of the best scenes. And then the constant teasing, because they're in Las Vegas when the team finds out. And so for the rest of the trip, it's basically them like going, there's a chapel. And it was really good. Like, I've been putting this off for a long time. I think part of it was because I'd seen reviews saying it wasn't as good as the first one. And do I think it's as good as the first one? No, I think it's different. I spent a lot of this book in tears, and this is a much slower book. It is a much slower paced book because there is a lot that these two characters go through, and they have to reevaluate their 11-year friendship through the eyes of people who love each other but have never been able to recognize that. It was a great time, so I'm glad that I finally read it. It is, not a book to read without tissues on hand, I would say. And I've just spent 7 minutes talking about one book. Editing me is going to be thrilled. Oh dear. Alright, so those are the books that I have read this week. In the comments, I would love to know if you've read any of them or if you're planning on picking any of them up. If you are, feel free to let me know what they are in the comments. Otherwise, feel free to share something you have been reading and loving in the last week. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a planet emoji down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.